theoretically speaking, the way I approach precarity in science in general, and then I'll go through the basic sciences that you're more interested in, is through these lenses of the transformations that have been ongoing in the higher education and science field through the past decades that were, according to many authors, driven by the so-called knowledge economy that pushes researchers and teachers in universities as well towards producing products and services that have that are sellable, let's call it like this, in the markets. And this led to transformations at different levels at scientific organizations, at universities and strictly scientific organizations, being in terms of their structures, the organizations themselves that are replicating the governance and management models from private institutions and relying on precarious works, in terms of practices with an instrumentalization of knowledge, and this can be in two different directions. On the one hand, through producing knowledge that can have an application and can be put in the markets, but we can also think of this instrumentalization in terms of policy and public policy-driven research. And also at the third level, there is a change in the culture of scientific work that is driven today by this performativity, which means that we all have to produce these metrics, these quantifiable metrics that we've actually heard of earlier on. The Portuguese context, just to give you some brief numbers, it's a context that is marked by a very, very deep growth during the past 2 decades, with 20,000 new PhD graduates on the last 10 years. And most of these PhD graduates were with fellowships until very recently, and to overcome all the issues regarding these fellowships, the previous government has implemented a couple of legislative changes that have actually led to fixed-term employment of scientists. So they hired most of these fellowship holders under fixed-term contracts, but actually, they have not integrated them in careers, and at least 75% of all contracts are on fixed terms, so they are outside of a career. And what was unknown at the moment was who were these precarious workers, what were their labor trajectories, and what sort of activities they developed, and how do they perceive, how do they make sense of this, of their work and of precarity. And it was exactly that the work that I've coordinated tried to understand. I applied a questionnaire to scientific precarious workers, and I'm not going to go into detail into this, but it combined both quantitative and qualitative questions and then analysis. And we had over 2,700 validated response. And the first result that I wanted to show you today was that, well, I did tell you in the beginning that most of the PhD graduates in Portugal, over 50% are women. When we look, and if we're just looking at fixed-term contract researchers, meaning researchers with precarious jobs, most of them are women. So 63% of these researchers are women, so they are overrepresented, which is in line with the general trend of the precarization. But when we look at the different categories along these trajectories, meaning, so first level after a PhD would be a postdoctoral fellowship, a second level would be a junior contract, then it's an assistant researcher contract, principal researcher contract. And when we look through these different categories, we could see very well what Isabel Lozada and others were saying today, this leaky pipeline. So while there is a higher probability of being a woman and being a postdoctoral researcher with a fellowship, and while there is a higher probability of being a woman and a junior researcher, when we go to the higher levels of these trajectories, and I'm calling them trajectories on purpose because this is really not a career, these people are outside permanent positions. When we go through assistant and principal researcher levels, then the probability is higher to be a man and to be an assistant researcher, of being a man and being in principal researchers. This means that while there is a feminization of precarious labor in academia, they are also excluded through all the trajectories and from top positions and decision-making positions. The second point that I wanted to make is regarding this this idea that people under precarious conditions are early career. In a sense, they are early career, but this does not overlap with age, at least in the Portuguese context. So when we make an analysis of when we analyze the ages of these researchers, it goes all through the ages, through all the period of their working lives. So it's all the way from 28 years old until 65 years old, which is the age of retirement in Portugal. And the average age in Portugal is 41 years old. So these are not young researchers. This idea that precarious researchers are young scientists just out of the graduation program does not seem to fit the context of the Portuguese academia. At the third level, the third point I want to make is that most of these people, most of these researchers have dependents on their own care. So 60% of them have children and other dependents that they need to take care of. And a number of children, for women in reproductive age is in Portuguese, it's called índice sintético de fecundidade, and I don't really know the name in English, but it's what I've said, the amount of children that women have on their reproductive age. It's around 1, which is extremely low, even for the Portuguese context, where for the whole population is around 1.3, which is already the lowest in the European Union. So precarity seems to have an impact in all these things. In what regards the basic sciences, the image gets even worse. Not only women are leaking out of these trajectories, having less probability of becoming appointed for higher positions through their trajectories, but also in all, they are underrepresented. So if we consider, and the concept that we followed for the different scientific areas was based on Frascati manual. So what we have are the categories that we have are natural sciences, that includes for the Frascati manual mathematics, and I'm very sorry for this, but that's what it is, and we just followed it. So natural and exact sciences, if you want to call it like that. And if you look at engineering and technology, that would include the ICT that Anne-Sophie was talking earlier on. Women are underrepresented in these areas, and there is again, you can see exactly the same pattern that we see in general, that is, women are have a bigger probability, a higher probability of being represented in the earlier stages of these precarious trajectories. Just to give you a very, very, very short look into the other results. So these trajectories are very long. People have scholarships, all of them, even the ones that are now with fixed term contracts have had scholarships 80% for over 5 years, 40%, 43% over 10 years. And what is interesting to notice is that there is not a line being from, so you have a PhD, then you have a fellowship, then you have a fixed term contract. That's really not what is happening. People are jumping in between different times of precarious situations, and we can see that through their speeches, the ones that we've recorded on our open questions, and where they say things like, I was a PhD fellowship for 3 years, and on the first opportunity, I got a contract as a fixed term researcher. After 5 years, I'm on unemployment. And the second line says exactly more or less the same on a different order. They work very long hours, 64% over 40 hours, 70% over 50 hours. They produce all the papers that over 90% have produced papers in Web of Science or Scopus on the previous years. And their perceived impacts of precarity are on things related to work. So they say that they do not have, so they impact on their academic freedom. They have impact on their participation in their institutions, because either they are not allowed to vote or to be part of the management units of their universities. They talk about pressure and dependencies, and also about harassment. The second impact is on their lives. So they are very uncertain, a lot of uncertainty in their futures. A lot of the speeches talk about this life suspended without no stability, the postponement of paternity, but also in their health. So when we evaluated professional burnout with a psychometric test that analyzes 3 dimensions of professional burnout: exhaustion, skepticism towards work, and professional efficacy, what we see is that more than half of them have considerable or very high levels of burnout. And through their speeches, we can relate these results of the psychometric test with the precarity, because they talk about the anguish that they feel on how I'm going to support my kid when my contract ends, a gradual lack of enthusiasm towards all spheres of my life, constant fear of failing grants, and things like this. The reason why they say is that they see this trajectories of precarity as the only way, the only thing that they can do. So and we get a lot of speeches like this saying that they love what they do, they really hate the situation, but that's the only way that they can stay in science, is to continue doing research under precarious contracts. So just summarizing, what we see is that the precarization is of very long term, and it has multiple level impacts, being in terms of the work, on their lives, on the participation in decision making, and others. There is a prevalence of structural asymmetries, being that of genders, but also of others that I didn't talk of here today, but regarding, for instance, nationality and migrant fellows that experience all these things into broader, deeper levels. There are also asymmetries between scientific areas, with women being underrepresented in natural and exact sciences, as well as in engineering and technology. Regarding the products of the outputs of their work, they say this precarity favors quantity over quality, and we've also heard a bit about this earlier today by Ursula. Regarding they talk about all the difficulties in having regarding the balance of work life and private and their life beyond work. It has impacts on their physical and mental health. It has problems regarding harassment, as Isabel was telling us today. And it has problems also, it has impacts also regarding social protection, and particular retirement, because if we go back to one of the earlier, and I'll stop sharing this now, but if we go back to the one of the earlier results, which was that these people stay under fellowships for very long terms, so they are not really making any considerable discounts for retirement plans. And so most of us will have lousy retirement plans once we get to 65, 66, 67 years old. And that's really a big problem that needs to be addressed. And I'll stop here, and thank you so much.